This is Regained Wellness Podcast with Jamie Logie, episode 110, The Dangers of Blue Light.
I'm blue, I've been beat, I've been died, 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 I've been beat, I've been died. I'm blue, I've been beat, I've been died, I've been beat, I've been died, I've been beat, I've been died.
Hey guys, what's happening? Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Jamie Logie. I run regainedwellness.com, and this is the Regained Wellness Podcast of the exact same name. So that works out pretty well. Easy to figure out, easy to find. If you haven't subscribed already, speaking of that, make sure you do on iTunes. That way you get the show automatically sent to you each week. Just hit the subscribe button when you're on iTunes, or if you're listening to this on a phone or whatever. Everyone loves hitting buttons, so hit that one. Then you automatically get them sent to you. And I'm ready to go. So this week, talking about blue light and the dangers of light exposure. Not dangers per se, it's just more the health problems that blue light is causing. And yeah, it's still a danger. It's not like an immediate threat like you're being held at knife point by your laptop, but this light can cause some real problems. And starting off the show with blue. Do you remember who sings that? Eiffel 65, if it was just on the tip of your tongue. So won't go too long, but a lot of just the information on the dangers of blue light, where it comes from, what it does to you, how to avoid it, all that sort of stuff. Let's just get right to it. So there's been a lot I've noticed in the last year, there's been a lot of information starting to be shared about the issues with blue light and what it is and how it affects our health. And it's really good. I think it's just one of those things that is, no one ever necessarily paid attention to, or information became more available and now we're more aware and different. I've seen this written about everywhere from scientific journals to, Live Strong, to the Huffington Post, to, I don't know, I think it was a relevant issue, and massive proof that it's an issue that I'll talk about in a little while. So what blue light is, just in case you're not aware, it's the light that's emitted from electronics that have screens on them. So that would be your laptop, your phone, your iPad or tablet. No one else uses real tablets besides iPads, do they? Forgive me if you do. But your TV as well. It's a certain type of electronic light that is emitted from screen-based electronics. This is different than your, light bulbs in your house, or even different than fluorescent lights. Fluorescent lights are close, but it's not technically an electronic-based light. And the issue with how blue light is different from these electronics is that it actually mimics the sun, and sunlight can keep us up longer. And this is the issue that blue light does. It basically prevents us from thinking it's nighttime. We basically have 24-hour artificial daylight, and it comes from these electronics and these screens. And if you've ever seen, in different parts in the north and up near, as you get near the Arctic Circle or the northern parts of Sweden and whatnot, where they have almost a 24-hour daylight issue, how this completely disrupts their sleep patterns. It displaces them. Their circadian rhythm is completely thrown off. That's what happens from too much sunlight exposure. Sunlight is still good for you, just not chronic long-term sunlight exposure. We need these cycles of the day. And so that's the issue when we're talking about the difference with like a light bulb. That's a completely different type of light that it emits. And with the blue light from the electronics, it has to do with things like, like wavelengths and nanometers and stuff like that. It's basically, it starts in ultraviolet light. It has these short wavelengths that run through the visible spectrum of light and then into infrared. So when you have in a rainbow, blue light comes after ultraviolet, and it has the shortest, what they call wavelength of visible light. And this is the same light from the sun, and these electronics are mimicking the exact same thing, just because of the amount of, just things like pixels and the backlit source. So completely different from a light bulb, which is obviously a softer, warmer glow. You're not, the actual issue, like, it is a blue tint that comes off it that you're not going to notice when you're in, say, in your living room as you're watching TV or whatnot, because then the rest of the room tends to be artificially lit, but more by, it tends to be light bulbs, even like the halogen type. It's a little bit of a different glow. And then you probably have not an exposed light bulb. You have either a lampshade or some sort of covering, and that sort of, not necessarily filters, but it softens the glow of it too. So this blue light's coming off like crazy, but you don't even know. So the best way to see it, I'm sure if you've driven by houses at night and their TVs are on, you see that blue glow coming from the house. It's more prominent when you're in a darker spot, but when you're exposed to it, your body doesn't know the difference between that and sunlight. And then that's the whole issue of preventing your sleep and then keeping you up. And then this all has to do, basically when it comes down to, is your melatonin production. So I'm sure you've heard of melatonin, and it's a pretty popular natural sleep aid, and it's something our body actually makes itself. It's a natural hormone that your body secretes that helps to maintain that wake sleep cycle, that circadian rhythm, that balance, or you might want to call it your biological clock, 'cause it's just when your body knows when to go to sleep and when to get up. The wake sleep cycle is the process of this whole procedure of how your body is in a more wakefulness state and more when it's shut down to sleep and repair. And the average 8 hours is your rough nighttime sleep, and then 16 hours is kind of your daytime activity. Then it depends on where you live in the world and the certain hemispheres, the time of year, with the sunlight exposure, and just the the tilt of the earth and how much daylight you have, the whole issue. So basically, the natural melatonin release in our bodies, the melatonin that's made by our bodies, is increased each day in response to darkness. You have your pineal gland, which sits behind your eyes, and the light that's coming through your eyes, or lack of light, is what determines the secretion of melatonin. So basically, melatonin, the production and the release, it peaks around 11 p.m. and around 3 a.m. And they measure it in what's called picograms. And the nighttime melatonin hormone levels are basically 10 times higher than in the daytime. And that's what's helping you sleep, staying asleep, and keeping that wakefulness biological clock running and humming along nicely. So the levels fall really sharply before daylight. And then by the time the daylight hours come up, they're barely detectable. It's basically been turned off. Once you open your eyes and are exposed to light, ideally natural sunlight, but whatever light is in the room or whatnot, as it's going through your eyes, it starts to turn off the melatonin production, and pretty quickly too. So the rise and the fall in this natural melatonin level, they signal the wake and the sleep times. And that's what circadian rhythm is if you wanted to define it simply, is your natural wake and sleep times. So with natural melatonin secretion, you've probably heard of the amino acid tryptophan, which is, related with serotonin, and it helps with, sleep cycles and drowsiness, and, tryptophan's in turkey, and that's what helps keep you drowsy after you eat this giant meal where your pant buckle explodes and you're lying on the couch and pass out during the halftime of the football game on Thanksgiving, or that might just be me. So what happens is, basically working with serotonin, it's the tryptophan is with the melatonin is released to the melatonin receptors in the brain, eye, and other areas to help control the sleep and wake cycles. So all these things sort of work together, with melatonin being the key of the whole thing, but tryptophan, the amino acid, and then serotonin they all kind of work in a combination. So melatonin has also what's called a half-life, which is similar with caffeine. I think I was talking about this not long ago. Caffeine, you'll feel the effects of caffeine, and the obviously alerts, potentially jittery, whatever physical feelings that will last a couple hours, depending on how much you're exposed to it and your tolerance level. But the thing is, though, it's not out of your system after that 2 hours. It has what's called a half-life, and that extends it further. So in the case of caffeine, the half-life is around 6 hours. And depending on how your body processes it, it can be up to 9.5 hours. So if you have caffeine at, say, 4 o'clock, it can potentially still be in your system up to midnight, even past. So if you're wondering why you have problems falling asleep, it might be because you're more sensitive to caffeine, and that half-life is affecting you more, and you might have to start backing off your cutoff point in the day. So if you find yourself having trouble with sleep, this is all related to, again, with the blue light and the melatonin and all that. But if you track your caffeine and you're aware of how much you have and how late you have, start backing it off. Start cutting it off at like 2, and then you might even have to cut it off at 12 if you're one of these super sensitive people to the caffeine half-life. So we're talking about the melatonin half-life. It's around roughly 20 to 50 minutes. It goes really quick. It's metabolized in the liver. It comes out through the urine. So it's not, you're not going to get those effects of a good natural sleep cycle because it's gone so fast. So shorter periods of, this is interesting, of melatonin production occur in the summer. Obviously, you have the longer days. There's more prolonged periods of exposure to sunlight. You're outdoors. You're more active. So it's not as prominent. And then there's more prolonged periods of production that obviously occur in the winter. So then that comes into the issue of the light during the nighttime from the exposure of the blue light. So not depending on where you live, the sun's going to set even at the latest, in the summer it can push maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock, but the average, let's just say 8 o'clock. I lived in England for a while. The sun in January would start setting around 3:30, 4 o'clock. It was horrific. And then living in Canada as well too, once daylight savings times hit, around 5:30, it was dark. So say 7 or 8 o'clock is when the sun's down and it's dark. Naturally, if we were living how our ancestors would without artificial light and house light, around that 8 o'clock point, our melatonin production would be up through the roof because there's no light coming through our eyes. So the pineal gland behind your eyes on your brain is able to start producing the melatonin and start shutting you down for the day. This is why, like, if you go camping, you notice you're in bed potentially earlier because you're out in the middle of nowhere. That light is cut off around 8, 9, whatever. You tend to go to sleep early. You might notice you sleep better because you followed that natural rhythm of the day with the rising and setting of the sun. You tend to get up earlier because you rise with the sunlight. So say at 9 o'clock, depending on, if it's a Friday or weekend or what your job is, you might just be getting going then. Things are lit up everywhere you go. It's that 24-hour perpetual daylight we're talking about here now. So once the outdoor, like the natural sunlight goes down, everything gets turned on. TVs, interior light, phones, which are going all day anyway. So our bodies still think that sunlight's coming in. So if you're up till, midnight, and you've had all that constant exposure to the blue light, you've shut down the melatonin production in your brain, and you're throwing your sleep cycles completely out of whack. And you've got, now by the time, say, when the sun exposure comes up earlier in the day, or you have to be up earlier, you've only had maybe 5 or 6 hours where you haven't had exposure to blue light. And this is, being conservative if you're going to bed around 11 or 12. If it's later, you're in a whole other issue there. So, and again, like your entire house springs to life later at night. So it's like you're outside at 12 o'clock in the afternoon on a July day with the sun just beating down. That's the way your body treats it when your house is just lit up and blue light and TV, and that's the time we tend to watch TV the most. So then the problem is with the electronics is say on old TVs, it would have been a little different. The light they would have emitted was a little bit different because the TVs had a picture tube and whatever. And now they're all backlit. The light's more electronic digital based. If you have a flat screen TV, it's either like an LCD screen or an LED screen, and it's that different type of light. So, maybe coming through the 70s, the 80s, 90s a bit, it wouldn't have been necessarily as bad because you probably had a picture tube based TV, which would still give off a little blue light, but not, as is my understanding, not as bad as flat screen TVs today. And then the fact the screen tended to be smaller too. I remember the biggest screen we had was a 27-inch TV, and it was mind-blowing. I thought we were at the movies when we got that thing in. And now I've got a 55-inch TV, which is better than most movie theaters. And that thing's starting to look small already too. So how spoiled am I when I'm complaining about the size of a 55-inch TV? And then if you're looking back at the 80s and 90s, not as much, we didn't really have the same technology. Obviously, no smartphones, no iPads, laptops maybe, computers maybe, depending on, same thing as a different sort of monitor effect that you're getting as opposed to like a flat HD style laptop screen. So the problem is now, as the day winds down, you might be watching TV to say 10, 11 o'clock. You will then maybe head to bed. You'll turn off all the natural lights, like the light bulbs and the room lights. But then if you still have your phone with you or your iPad or your laptop, that blue light is coming in even way more intense because now there's no other light around you. And check your phone sometime. If you're in a dark room, not even using a flashlight, turn it around, even on like mid brightness setting, it can still light up the whole room. So that stuff is, you're holding it within, I don't know, a foot within your face. So that blue light is just going directly into your eyes. Or if you're using a laptop, it's like you're staring into the sun almost, just on a little level. So melatonin is non-existent. Your body is completely awake. What's happening now is it has to do with the stress hormone levels as well too. If you're not sleeping, your body doesn't know that you're watching 9 straight episodes of Friends on Netflix at 12:30 at night, or you're on your phone on Instagram till whenever. All it knows is you're not asleep, and something must be happening to be keeping you awake at this hour, because the natural cycle of the day is gone. It's dark out. Your body knows that's when it should be shutting down and going to sleep. So it just knows it's awake. It doesn't know if it's a famine or you're exposed to some sort of environmental trauma or you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. It's just basically awake. Your body is now secreting stress hormones, primarily cortisol. And I'm sure you're familiar with that. That's your fight or flight hormone, which is very important if you're jumping out of the way of a speeding car or a triceratops is charging at you, if you lived in the Paleolithic time. It's amazing because that stuff can save your life. It shuts down, these stress hormones shut down non-essential functions in the body. They use sugar more efficiently. They're basically just trying to save you. So that's amazing. But when this stress hormone and cortisol is constantly secreted at a chronic level day by day, that's when you start running into some massive problems. So you're not sleeping, your body is not repairing itself, it's not rejuvenating, your immune system starts to take a hit, and that chronic stress over long term is leading to pretty much every disease you can think of. Throw it out there: heart disease, cancers, diabetes, high blood pressure, and then down to things like just digestive problems, insomnia, obviously, joint pain to depression to anxiety. Anything significant is usually tied in with this chronic stress, and that's the issue with not sleeping in general, and that's the issue with what blue light is doing. It's keeping us awake, and it's throwing off kind of all aspects of your health. So that's the way to sum it up, that melatonin is very important in the day. It keeps us going, and it needs to be naturally secreted at night, and the more you're exposed to light, and especially blue light, the more it's going to prevent you from having a natural sleep-wake cycle. So what you can do about it, I mean, the first thing is obvious, is to just stop using electronics late at night. Ideally cutting them off at least an hour, but 2 hours before is a little more effective. Try it out, because if you wake up groggy in the morning because you were on your iPad playing Candy Crush till God knows how late, and you feel groggy the next morning, it's 100% because of that. I mean, your day could have been busy too, but your body knows how to shut down and replenish itself through sleep. It's a magic pill, the amazing stuff sleep does for you. So if you're groggy in the morning, you can trace it back to that. If you cut the electronics out a couple hours before and let your body shut down normally, maybe like listening to music instead, or if you're reading, that can be a bit different. It can be a strain on your eyes if you have a natural light source for it, like a clip-on light, which still is a tiny bit of blue light, but not the same as having a laptop blaring right in your face. So cutting it out the couple hours before will really help your natural melatonin production. It'll help your sleep. It'll help your circadian rhythm, the whole deal. You'll have better hormone balance. The stress hormone issue won't be what it was. Now, I understand that's a hard thing to do, and I totally agree, because you're still wanting to be on your phone late, or you're watching TV or whatnot. So the few steps you can take if this is something that's tough to cut off, I mean, the first one's might seem odd, and possibly something you'll never do, but you can buy these sunglasses that are an orange tint that'll naturally filter out the light from the TV, and they're becoming more popular. I mean, you can buy them on Amazon. I've seen them in Walmart, and I know a lot of people that use them who are, if they're exposed to blue light late, if they're watching TV or whatnot, and they'll wear these other things. The next thing you can do is, if you have to be working on your laptop late, past like 10 o'clock or 8 or 9 or whatever it is, there's a program called F-Lux, so F.lux. And what it does is it changes the shade of your laptop screen, and it basically starts to cut out the blue light, and you can have it at different settings. So it gives off more of a reddish type glow, which is more accustomed to what our eyes would see. So if you're thinking ancestrally, how we would have lived in communities and whatnot, the main light we would have had would have been firelight, whether that was up to just tribes and communities around fire pits. Their eyes would naturally taper out as the fire would burn down into lighter or less bright embers. By the end, it's just that slight glow of it, and you can replicate that whole thing on the laptop with this F-Lux program. I've been using it forever. You set it, and it figures out where your time zone is and when it should naturally turn itself on, and then you can set the intensity of it. So it'll start out at it'll still have that reddish glow, but it'll start out as a brighter type light, and as it gets later, it narrows down almost to this it's just such a dim light that it's the equivalent of like embers in a fire, or even candlelight. And again, that's more than natural light we would have had, even up to 100 or so years ago, when we didn't have interior lighting. We would have had candlelight, so that would have been a more natural glow for our eyes. So it's really cool with this program that it'll really, I mean, there's still a little bit of, you're still going to have some eye strain, because you're looking at something and your eyes are having to focus and concentrate in a darker environment, but that blue light will be, pretty much eliminated. So it's an awesome program. Then the other thing, this is what I was talking about before, that you can tell the issue with blue light is very significant, because Apple introduced what's called the night shift feature. And if you're an iPhone user, I hate to be ignorant, I'm not sure if anything like this exists for Android, any Android-based phones. I don't know, because it's not built into the phone, it's built into the operating system. So like with Apple, it was in the iOS 9 update, I believe, but there's certain phones, like the actual model of the phone determines if it can handle that adjustment. And I think with iPhone, I think it works. I think they cut it off at the 5S, if I'm not mistaken. The 5S and the 5C, it doesn't have the basically the brains in the phone to be able to work with that night shift mode. So what's past the 5? So 5S, 5C, then it was the 6, the 6S, the SE, the 7. Basically anything I think past, if it has a 6 in the name or above, I think it's able to do it. So what they did is it's similar to that FLux program I was talking about. If you use this, you know exactly what it is. You hit the night shift mode. If you're bringing up your, you swipe up from the bottom menu where it's got your, your Bluetooth or your wireless and all that. And then there's a sun outline that's got kind of like a, looks like an eclipse, like black part marked out, and then it says night shift. So you turn that on and it gives it more of that natural red glow. So if you're using your phone, this is not an excuse that you can still be on your phone for 5 hours and it's not going to cause any sleep disruptions, but that it's going to minimize that blue light because of that reddish glow. So you can set it for when you want it to turn on and turn off. So mine comes on at 10 and turns off at 7, which actually I think is the default setting, which is pretty good. So you don't really have to do too much. And then you can just change your normal brightness back and forth. So, if it's later at night, keep that all the way down and it's still going to be decent light exposure. This is I was talking about that thing before. If you're in your room, say it's completely black in your room and you have your phone on normal and even at mid brightness, and you can see it can completely light up the room. When it's on night shift mode and the brightness intensity is down lower, it doesn't light up the room. It's just in a small little area where it's giving off this more warmish tone. So that's why I realized, and I think everyone should realize, it's a significant issue. If Apple does something, it usually means it's completely relevant. They kind of set the standard for anything to do with technology. So if they introduce a feature like that, it's either the demand is so big or they're being proactive and seeing that something is effective to make their product the best thing it can be. So that I was psyched to see that come out, because I've always wanted something like that on my phone, because like I said, I was using FLux for so long on my laptop. So awesome to see that. Again, if write to me and share if Android is doing this too. I'm at info@regainedwellness.com. I'll probably look into this after, but because I've been using iPhone for a while, I'm more aware of that. So I'm not sure what their whole thing is with that. Okay, let's cut it off there. Hopefully that got you up to speed with why blue light is an issue, how your body works, melatonin production, and a few steps you can do to kind of take control of it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for listening. Like I said, write to me at info@regainedwellness.com if you had more questions about this or shows you want to see. Or I totally forgot about this. If you're watching the Oscars last night, how did I not start off the show with this? With the worst screw up in the history of any award shows, with how they buggered over La La Land, read out the wrong name, and it was Moonlight that won the Oscar. And that wasn't on Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. They were reading the card that was for Best Actress in a Dramatic Role or whatever. So it said, I'm sure you've seen this, and this is probably old news depending on when you're listening to this, but what a gong show. Holy crap. I don't know. They're trying to keep the integrity of this crazy industry and town and all that, and then they pull this off. Just can't get a card right. $10 million production budget on the show, a year in production, and someone forgets the wrong envelope. Beautiful. Okay, that's it for me. Thanks for listening. I'll see you soon. Bye.